tax evasion. It's like having the Republican primary of 1996 every day of your life. And my first experience, direct experience with election and politics was in 1931 when I was 8 years old. I knew about politics, but we lived in Old Pullman, where the Pullman shops were. And 1931, as most people, if you've studied a little history, know, that was really the depths of the Depression. The Pullman shops were down. Pullman was an ethnic neighborhood. You had every national group that you could think of out there working. Thousands of people would go past our window on their way to work on their bicycles. And that was my first economics lesson. One day I noticed that the bicycles had dwindled. There were very few bicycles. So I said to my father, I said, Daddy, where are all the men on the bicycles? And he said, son, there's something called a depression, and they don't go to work anymore. But this night, wonderful night, Anton Cermak, who really built what was called the Democratic machine in Chicago. The Irish like to think they did, and a lot of people who are anti-Irish prefer to think. But Anton Cermak, who was a bohemian free thinker, he had been a mule skinner in a mine, in a coal mine down in Braidwood, which isn't very far from here. He was running against Big Bill Thompson, a Republican, who was one of the most outrageous figures in the history of world politics. Now, he's the guy who threatened to punch King George on the nose if he dared to come to Chicago. And Big Bill Thompson was throw down your hammer and get a horn. In other words, don't knock the city, but praise it. Well, people were tired of Big Bill at that time, and they had calliops and with the music, and we lived on, we could look out on 113th Street, and here came this thing with all the music and the paraders, and all of a sudden, there was a bombardment. Pullmanites were throwing tomatoes, rocks, watermelons, whatever they had handy at this truck. And I realized right then, instinct told me, as young as I was, Cermak is going to win this election. And Cermak won the election, and that was, and there were Democrats winning elections all over the country, and that was the tip-off even to me. By now I had matured, and I was 9, that somebody I hadn't heard of, hardly anybody had heard of, named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was going to be elected president in 1932. So it's with us always, and people say that the alleged machine isn't as powerful as it used to be, and people who say that are affluent. They don't need a precinct captain to come around and bring them a bag of coal as they did during the Depressions, that you kept your home warm, brought you a bag of groceries, brought you some hand-me-down clothes maybe so your kids could go to school dressed decently. The precinct captains are still out there working. They even work in the affluent neighborhood that I come from. They really don't have to work because almost everybody in the ward is Democrat. It's just some of my friends have been into politics, in and out. Some are in now, and now the sons of friends are in politics, and it's wonderful if you don't take it seriously.
Well, what is it in Chicago? I mean, why is Chicago politics different? Everybody, I think you're absolutely right. It's in the water or something. It's in the air here. But why?
Chicago politics is different, I've always believed, because of the ethnicity. That it's largely been broken up now, but every neighborhood was an enclave of the Poles, the Serbians, Croatians, the Irish, the Italians, and these people almost always voted as a bloc. That no longer holds, but you can still get them to vote as a bloc. Now, the thing that's hurt what and I always question the word machine, but that's what people use, so I'll use it. What's hurt is that these ethnics have moved to the suburbs, and they're not voting in Chicago elections. Now, I lived for 3 years in Blue Island, which is just south of Chicago, and I felt terribly deprived. It was very nice to be in Blue Island, but I couldn't vote in the Chicago election, and it ruined my whole day. It was like when I can't go to Mass on Sunday, I don't feel right the rest of the day. So if you can't vote for the mayor of Chicago, can't vote for an alderman, what use is life?
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Sounds good?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about ethnicity, because you're right. I mean, since the war, things have, demographically, things have changed. Nevertheless, ethnicity and also race. I mean, the whole black-white thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been in an American city where it's quite sort of out in the open. People talking about it, and what does that mean politically?
Outsiders don't understand that that Chicago isn't an Irish town. Chicagoans have elected Irish mayors. They have spun off the organization that was built by the Bohemian mayor Anton Cermak, and the Irish had a great advantage, as they had all over this nation, because they and the British were the only immigrants who came with the language, who could speak English. That gave them a tremendous leg up. The Irish have voted for their own, which is the reason. A lot of people don't understand the reason that Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States the first time is a lot of middle-aged and elderly Irish American men had convinced themselves that he really was George Gipp. Now, if Lou Ayres had taken that role when it was offered, but he was busy and he couldn't play Reagan. I mean, he couldn't play Gipp. We would never have heard of Ronald Reagan as a presidential candidate. But that's how these people are. Now, a lot of them have become Republicans. And I'll tell you, you talk about brainwashing, about people trying to blot out their past. Many of these people who are elderly now and have become Republicans were children of families on relief during the Depression. And I know that these people were on relief. My dad worked every day, so we were fortunate. But these people, they are not trying to fool you. They've totally blocked it out. They deny that their father was on relief. They deny that they were brought out of this thing by President Roosevelt and his programs, that a man could at least make $50 a month and have something to do, have a job to go to during the day. But the most powerful group in this city should have been the Poles, because the Poles have the numbers. People think the Irish have the numbers. That's not true. The Italians don't have the numbers. The Poles have the numbers. They could have elected their own man, but there's so much divisiveness in the Polish communities that they always have people running against one another instead of running together, and as a result, the Irish just wait there on the side street until the day of the election, and they pour into the booth. There was a great candidate here who gave Mayor Richard J. Daley a marvelous run, and that was, let's stop this for a moment. Can I go right? Can I go? Yeah.
Yeah, just hold on.
Can I go right back?
We're just listening to this.
Yeah, sure.
Can I go right back to where I was?
Yeah, why don't you just go say there was a great...
Yeah. There was a great Polish candidate here, Ben Adamowski, who gave Richard J. Daley, the original Mayor Daley, the best run of his life. And if Adamowski had been able to organize the Polish community, I think he probably would have won that election. But they just don't do that. The Irish fight with one another until it comes down, okay, we picked this mope, as they'll say, we've got to stick with him. we'll vote for him anyway. And someday, Harold Washington, I was convinced that Harold Washington was elected, and I'm on a TV sports show, and he was on with us a couple of times. A very impressive man. He would have been the mayor of Chicago for 20 years if he hadn't died of that heart attack, because he studied Richard J. Daley. He knew how Richard J. Daley did it, and he did it the same way. And this guy was so popular when we had an Irish woman mayor, as you know, Jane Byrne, and we had a time of a terrible blizzard, which got her elected. But in the following spring, we had potholes all over the city. We lead the world in potholes because we have so many thaws. Well, nothing was done. The street I lived on, under Mayor Byrne's administration, as soon as Harold Washington took over, those trucks were out there with the signs on them, so you know who sent them, right on this street. And at that time, there wasn't a black person in that area within 3 miles. But there were the trucks, street and sanitation trucks, and whatever, the highway maintenance, whatever they call it, fixing those potholes. So these are the little things that are so important in any city. Just like, I often thought that if mayors could have been free agents, Richard J. Daley should have put himself up, should have optioned himself out, because it would have been wonderful to see what he could have done with New York. If he could have gotten New York organized, it's New York, Philadelphia, Boston, all those old cities, the biggest problem they have is they don't have alleys. That's why at 3 o'clock in Manhattan, it might take you an hour to get 5 or 6 blocks, because these trucks are out there double parked, triple. You feel sorry for the poor men who work at these jobs. Where are they going to put the truck? But here in Chicago, we have alleys. Well, somehow Daley would have gotten alleys built, even if they'd been elevated somewhere. He would have bought the air rights and but it just, these people learn from one another. Now, Richard M. Daley, I don't know if he would admit this, but he learned from Harold Washington, just as Harold Washington learned from the original Mayor Daley.
And what else did they learn besides services?
The most important thing, whoever said all politics is local, is absolutely right. I don't think there is anything more important than services in a city administration, because when everything's going well, nobody talks about City Hall. But if you have a big pothole in the middle of your street, everybody on that block is angry. If something goes wrong with your water, if something, let's say the gas company has a breakdown, they don't blame the gas company. They don't blame the public utility. They blame City Hall. So you've got to have people out there who fight. I'm talking about the people who come out of City Hall, who are the agents of City Hall. They've got to be out there fighting to get things done, because if they don't, their guy is going to lose. Now, the unfortunate thing in this city is that the black people who are now are more than 50% of the population, just don't get that kind of representation. And much of this stuff, this is going back in history, but and I'm afraid it's not taught in political science. Most of this stuff goes back to what were called the burial societies. Every ethnic group had its burial society back in the late 1800s up to about World War I, because if a man died, and men died young in those days, there wasn't this sort of life insurance, there was no Social Security, there was no so-called safety net, so the people buried their own. And this was why Cermak was so strong, the mayor of Chicago, who really started the democratic political machine here. It was why the reason he was so powerful is he was Bohemian, and he belonged to a Bohemian society that supported him right down to everything he did. They were for. There was a beer back when beer came back in the 30s, when I was very young. There was a beer called USA Pilsner, Y-U-S-A-Y, and I used to puzzle over that. What in the world can you say mean? Well, USA was the United Societies of America. That was the Bohemian Society, and they were the people who insisted that Anton Cermak drive Al Capone out of the city, which is what Cermak did, because he was a very tough guy, former coal miner, and he called Al Capone in and said, Al, you either get out of the city or my policemen are going to kill every one of you. And it's remarkable that all of this is in news clippings. When I wrote my book, Daily of Chicago, I was researching this stuff, and I found it almost hard to believe. These policemen were killing these hoodlums, were killing them and admitting it. One of the top hoodlums, allegedly he had committed suicide on a railroad track up in Ravenswood. Well, the truth was that a couple of Cermak's policemen went up there and just blew him away. And the blacks didn't have the burial society. And the reason, you have to remember, the blacks didn't come here in any great numbers until World War I, when there was a shortage of labor. They were needed to work in the stockyards. And then there was the great resurgence, as they called the freedom trains that came up from the south. The Illinois Central came right into 12th Street Station and dropped off the blacks, and that was the next tremendous growth in the black population. But not long after they arrived, the stockyards left, and they were deprived of jobs. Many of those people, black people, had, because of the stockyards, had very good jobs, dirty jobs, messy jobs, but jobs that paid well, so they could support their families and send their children to school, support their churches. And if the blacks were organized as Harold Washington organized them, we'd still have a black mayor in the city of Chicago. But there's all this intramural battling going on. They all want a piece of it, and I always talk about the fact that the Irish will fight right up until 3 or 4 days before the election, and they'll say, well, this is our mope, we don't like them, but we're going to go for them. The blacks don't do that. Someday the blacks will, but by that time the blacks will have all the problems of the city. The other thing that's been terribly neglected, and Richard J. Daley understood, was public school education here. I'm a product of the public high schools, and shortly before I went into high school, during the Depression, teachers were being paid in scrip, which young people don't understand. That's paper. It's like getting a coupon, and you could take it down to the grocery store, because there was no money to pay the teachers. First, Ed Kelly bailed out the school system here, but there was a big difference. A lot of the school children then were white, who went to public school, as I did. I went to a school that terribly overcrowded. We were the World War I baby boomers, and school that was built for maybe 1,000 children had 2,500, but probably one quarter to one third were Catholic kids. So the administration was interested in us. That isn't true anymore. It's brutal. The people who have made it because of what they were given by the Chicago public school system, they don't want to support it with their taxes. You know, why should I? And there are a lot of vulgarities about the only schools that are doing a job to help black children are the parochial schools, both Catholic and other denominational schools.
Yeah, can I just ask you about the other side of
Yeah.
the equation there?
Yeah.
Because you were on a topic that we're interested in about the blacks being organized, and then someday
Right.
they'll be able to elect another mayor. Well, what's the white response to that politically? Okay, I mean Harold Washington was in fact mayor, and then he died. How do the whites see the potential for blacks taking back City Hall? What does it mean to them?
Whites understand that it's inevitable that one day, and perhaps one day soon, the black people of Chicago will regain control of City Hall and perhaps of the city. Now there's a distinction there. Just because you have City Hall doesn't mean you have the city, and that was proven during the years of Martin J. Connelly, who came in as a reformer, but like some of our presidential reformers of recent memory, he didn't know what he was doing, and they took it all away from him. The city council took control away from him. Richard J. Daley took control back because he realized that the mayor had to run the city. The black electorate here just isn't properly organized, and people ask me, well, how do whites react to this prospect? Well, whites didn't react very well to the fact that Harold Washington was running against two white candidates, which changed the election. That was stupidity in itself, to have the two white candidates. I'm talking about politically. I'm not bringing race into this at all. But after he was elected, and he demonstrated that he was a good mayor, you still had racial remarks made in white strongholds, but people say, hey, this guy's a hell of a good mayor. What difference does it make? And of course, he had such appeal, and he had that bombastic speaking style and all those 8-letter words, which, see, Washington was very bright. He knew Harold off the record, he'd laugh about that because he knew that this was the thing that impresses white people. Hey, this guy can use big words. Think about it. This black guy can use big words. And of course, most of them who say that can't use big words. So they're delighted. But if the electorate, I don't think that the black electorate here, it might take 25 years to get it organized because everybody wants a piece of it. And you can't do it that way. As soon as an aldermanic position opens, you've got 6 people who want to run, 8 people, ward committeemen, and we had these example. We had the congressional race. We had at least 2 outstanding candidates, local candidates for that job. Who came in and took it? Jesse Jackson Jr. Now, he may become a very effective legislator in Washington, but he's not helping the black political situation in Chicago. He's just splitting it more and more and more. All these fragments are flying out. These people who thought, and 2 of them were women, who thought, well, I ought to have a real true shot at that job. They're saying, hey, I'm never going to support Jesse Jackson Jr. or his father for the rest of my life. And you've got that opposition out there. And I'm asked again, how do the white people feel about this? Well, I've said how they felt about Washington, but white people don't care very much because the white people are leaving. Now, in the ward I live in the 19th ward, which is a pocket of affluence, one of the 2. It's second in income, average income within the city limits. People are moving back here, young people, because there are attractive, the housing is attractive. You can get a beautiful house here for probably $60,000, $80,000 to $100,000 less than you'd pay for a comparable house in, say, Hinsdale or one of the northern suburbs. But the working class family, they're moving out. They're moving out to Tinley Park and other distant suburbs, so they don't give a damn what's going to happen here. And that's why the school system is in such terrible shape.
But there's also a new element here, which is the Mexicans. I mean, sort of in the whole ethnic equation.
Well, you mean Hispanics?
Hispanics generally, but
yeah.
I mean, the Mexicans are, I guess, the biggest, the fastest growing group.
Well, but see, the Mexicans have been here forever. That's the difference. And Mexican families are stable. Once they get here, the Mexican father is in the home, and the Mexican father runs the home. It's a very male-dominated society. I don't think we had a recent example here. We have this intramural fighting now between the Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. And if they don't organize, you're going to have a Mexican candidate, you're going to have a Puerto Rican candidate, you're going to have mayoral elections in Chicago where there'll be the Democratic candidate. I'm talking about primaries now. The guy who's in office, or if he's died, the one that the Democratic committeemen have picked. And then you're going to have a Mexican candidate, you're going to have a Puerto Rican candidate, and you're going to have a black candidate. And it's like last summer, or last spring, I should say, when Bill Clinton was just sitting there laughing about what was going on in the Republican primaries. We'll soon know how that's going to work out. But the Democrat who was either the incumbent or has been chosen to run for mayor, he'll watch these people, the Mexicans, the Puerto Ricans, and oh God, and the blacks. Now, here in this town, it's significant we've never had a Chinese candidate. And the Chinese are admired by everybody. And if one day some young Chinese guy says when he's 24, 25 years old, he comes out of Princeton or Yale or Harvard, someday I'm going to be mayor of Chicago, and I'm going to be mayor of Chicago pretty soon. This guy will be so attractive, but what will happen is that the Democrats will preempt him. They'll take him over. But I just can't understand why we've never had a Chinese mayor in this city. Because the education level is tremendous.
But the numbers aren't there.
The numbers don't matter. It's the attractiveness of the candidate. Who would have thought back in the 30s that a mule skinner from Braidwood, Illinois, named Anton Cermak would have been idolized by all the Irish Catholics, all the Polish Catholics, all the Italian Catholics. This guy was a free thinker, and it made no difference to anybody. Hey, Tony knows how to get things done.
One of the things we were tape change. This is great.
He never drank. He never smoked. He never married. He just gave his life to Morgan Park High School. Mm-hmm. And at age 71 or 72, they wouldn't let him quit. He was still working. He was volunteering 30 seconds out of it somewhere.
I think we'll get a little more with you, actually. Last year we came and we were here during the mayor's race. The big thing, though, was that we hung out with several aldermanic campaigns. We hung out all over the place, South Side, Ambrosio Madonna, in Pilsen, Northwest Side with Brian Doherty, a bunch of different people. They were all doing the same thing, their campaigns. It was like watching the armies being sent forth.
Right.
What's all that about?
It's about jobs, I'm sure, and it's about opportunity. I don't want to be too unflattering, but a lot of young people get into politics and on the fringes of politics, and it's just not in Chicago aldermanic elections, it's in national elections, 2 presidential elections, because either they can't think of anything else to do, or they're not capable of doing anything else. And it's a springboard. So many of these young men and young women who get into the fringe of politics, they're going to law school at night. And they get their law degree, and then they begin to have political dreams of their own. And there are all these models out there, like Richard J. Daley, who went to night school at night to law school at night for probably 12 or 14 years before he got his degree. This single-mindedness, and during the day, he went to law school at night, but during the day he was working in the political machine in Chicago. And these aldermanic elections are always the same as anyone comes in from outside the city understands by observation, because why are we doing it this way? It's like the Army. Oh, we've always done it this way. It's the only way they know how to do it. And it works. It works. But if you have an attractive candidate today, an attractive opposition candidate, particularly in the primary, he has a chance, even against all the doorbell ringers, because the administration doesn't have the power it had in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, even in the 60s. Things changed dramatically during the administration of Lyndon Johnson, and the mess he got into as a result of the Vietnam War, the way he handled it. People just became disillusioned. And they're still disillusioned, as the Republican primaries of last winter demonstrated so dramatically.
What about what is it with the organization? I mean, what do they have to do to elect their candidate? It's an enormous attention to detail. And I don't think a lot of people know about that, but we have a lot of pictures of it, the pluses and the minuses, and the door knockers and the thises and the that's. I mean, what's all that? What is it? Why do they have to do all that?
That's what it is too.
Give me that again.
Okay, well, we see people like on the Saturday before the election, you're getting the kind of the pep talk. You go out there, ring those bells, palm cards, get your pluses and minuses in order. Get them in. It's just an enormous amount of attention to detail to get the vote out. And sort of, if you can sort of describe what a campaign has to do and why that's important.
Vince Lombardi said and was criticized that winning is the only thing, and he never should have been criticized, because that's the point of professional sports, and that is also the point of politics. I don't need to say professional politics, because there is no other kind of politics. In politics is professional because everybody who does a little job, no matter how insignificant, gets paid in some way. If not in money, he gets paid in prestige. He gets paid by his mother being appointed to run the switchboard down at political headquarters or police headquarters, something like that. But they have to win, and they have to know that they're going to win. And people have said to me, on the Saturday, election's on Tuesday, so on Saturday, you go into these little storefronts, and you go into the offices, you go into 11th Ward headquarters on Halsted Street, and it's like a beehive. About 350 days of the year, you could probably find cobwebs on the doorknob, because nothing's going on there. But everything goes on that day and into that night and into Sunday morning, because they have to know, is John Maloney and his wife Marge and those 5 kids, are they going to vote for us this year as they have? We've been hearing things about John. John's upset because he wanted Tommy to get on the sergeant's list this year, and Tommy didn't make it. So we've got to go over there and make sure that those Maloneys are going to vote with us again. And it's there's a romance to it. These young people particularly, and some precinct captains are elderly people, but they enjoy that because it gives them a chance to rub shoulders with the candidates and be around. Maybe even the mayor will drop in, and it's just, it's wonderful. I can understand it, because my mother and dad, when I was very small out in Pullman, which was a wonderful ethnic enclave, my mother and dad were precinct captains for a fellow named Sheldon Govier. Now, you had every ethnic, this goes back to what I always tell people, where were the Poles? Why didn't the Poles have a mayor? I mean, an alderman. Why didn't the Irish? Sheldon Govier was a Scotsman. but he also was a great soccer player. And that was important to everybody in that community because soccer was a big game for all these people who came from Europe. And Sheldon Govier was a very bright man who dressed well. So my parents were out there, and my dad, after World War I, he was a blacksmith, not a horseshoer, but a man who worked with heavy metal. And he worked all of his life as a blacksmith in the post office garage here in Chicago. And he never said this to me, but I'm sure that the fact that he was a precinct captain for Shell Govier in the old Ninth Ward helped him to be appointed to that job, which was, you had to be appointed. You had to, the old saying in politics, don't send nobody that nobody sent. It's really true, because you have no chance. If nobody sent you, you're going to be sitting on that bench outside the office, and the guy's going to go, that you're trying to see, is going to go out the back door.
So what's, okay, so that's...
Okay, somebody monitors.
Yes, yes. Okay, so that's one side of it. Okay, that's the, you support me, I'll put your son on the sergeant's list. Okay, isn't there another side to Chicago politics that's a little more what they call the hardball side, the withdrawing of favors? Another thing that we did, for example, is we went out at night with a couple of guerrilla sign crews where they're busy tearing down the signs of the opposition. I mean, all that's part of it too.
Oh yeah. Give me a few more example of what you want, of the guerrilla tactics.
You don't vote for me, your garbage can goes away. You don't get, can't the alderman giveth, but the alderman can
I doubt that the garbage can example holds anymore. I just don't think that would happen. It couldn't happen, because the guy would go down to his neighbor's garbage can and put the garbage in there. But I can go into the signs. So many people, outsiders, who have never lived in Chicago, think that Chicago politics, the drive toward getting a candidate elected, that the tactics are antiquated. That they put up those signs. They still put up those signs. They nail those signs up on poles, and they're up for months. And why do they do it? Well, it's part, to me, as I read it, it's part of the business of politics. You give somebody something to do. Now you go out and you put up your signs. Let's say you're an organization person. You go up, you nail your signs all over the neighborhood, and then the next day, you see a candidate who's running against your candidate, and his sign is either right above or right below. So what do you do in the dark of night? You go out and tear down that sign. And then their people go down and tear out. It's craziness. It's all it is, but it's fun. To me, it's the romance of politics. What are you going to do? You're going to sit there and let them put signs up? You can't do that. There's a guy telling you, hey, you get out there and tear down all those signs. But they do it automatically. Some of these people, particularly where I live, who are city employees, they tear down the signs on the way to work. They see an opponent's sign, they stop the car, or if they're walking over to the train, hey, what's he doing? They take it personally. And you see too the wonderful, the acrobatics with the big ladders. They get the signs up as high as they can. They put the signs on the expressway crossings. Well, if you can put it on, some other guy can take it off. If you've got a big ladder, the other guy has a bigger ladder. So it's sort of harmless nonsense as far as I can see. But the viciousness is largely gone. Where people are beaten at the polling places, that doesn't go anymore, because there's always a policeman there, and this is a bored policeman, and he wants to sit there and read the newspaper. He doesn't want some shrill housewife who's an election judge say, oh, officer, there's some man out there. He doesn't want to run out in the snow and have to apprehend somebody. Leave me alone. Stay away from my territory. It's police. It's like police work everywhere. You know, if you're going to steal a car, you better not steal it here. Hey, go over there a few blocks, kid, and steal a car there. Don't steal cars on my watch, is what they love to say. So it's really the same. You're not. Oh, even when I was young, politics here was very, very rough, physical, where people were beaten and people were arrested in great numbers, and people tried to vote with phony cards, and they were still voting the men on Skid Row as many times as they'd show up, and they'd get a bottle of Muscatel for their efforts. Well, the Skid Row is largely gone. They're people living in shelters, or they're living on the street. And the people, I'm talking about the terribly poor, the destitute. They were the people who voted early and often. But Chicagoans, because it is our municipal pastime, they take elections seriously. There's really next Wednesday, or is it next Wednesday? No, what am I thinking about? No, I'm thinking about primary elections. There's no reason to vote in a lot of these primary elections, but they go down there anyway. And it's, you meet your neighbors, and hey, she's a Republican, watch her. We don't really trust her. She's a nice neighbor, but I don't know, she went wrong somewhere. She's a Republican, and I remember her father was a Democrat, and her grandfather was on relief, but they've forgotten all that.
Do you know were there ever any songs, like old campaign songs, local, for alderman or mayor that you remember?
No.
Sometimes we try to see if there's anything like that.
The one song that you should get is Back of the Yards. Have you ever heard Back of the Yards?
Probably, but I don't know.
Back of the Yards, an old Chicago town where a friend is a friend. He'll never let you down. It's a rousing song. For many of us, it's the Chicago anthem. And the thing that no outsider can understand is neither of the Chicago songs, My Kind of Town, Chicago is, and the other one, the Toddlin' Town. People literally throw up at bars when they hear those songs. They hate those songs. Those are songs for outsiders. But and three young guys out here about 5 years ago wrote a delightful song. It's called Southside Irish. And that's excellent. That'd be great background music for you because it's all in rhyme. And it talks about the wards and the parishes. It's an essence. In fact, one of the guys who wrote it is going, I'm having a party next Tuesday, and he's going to entertain us.
Mr. Gleason, can I have you move a little forward? You're leaning back out of your light there.
Yeah.
You can lean back, but...
Well, we're still not working, are we? We're not doing anything now, are we?
Well, we were, yeah.
Oh, during that?
Yeah.
Oh.
You
No.
were great.
No, I was just giving you some help because both
about
those
the songs, yeah.
about
Yeah,
anything you do about the 11th ward or 14th ward anywhere in the neighborhood of the old stockyards, you want to hear that song.
Yeah, I know it's a famous song. I don't know that.
And
Do you know more of the words? Because if you do, could you just go through maybe one of the verses or something for us?
not really. I just don't. I just don't have it. I'm one of the people who has a very bad memory for lyrics.
Yeah, I usually come good for like the first line, and then it drops off.
And I can't carry a tune. I tell all my Irish friends, if all the Irish could sing as we think we can, we'd be bigger pains in the ass than we really are.
Speaking of the Irish, tell us about the St. Patrick's Day parade in Chicago. What does that mean politically?
I think the St. Patrick's Day parades, there are two parades in Chicago. There's the downtown parade and there's the South Side parade, which was the original parade. I don't think they have any significance politically. I think Bill Clinton marching in the South Side parade down Western Avenue, which isn't far from my home, in 1992, helped him in Chicago because it humanized him. And it helped people to see him because really nobody knew who this guy was. enjoy politics, but I knew very little about Bill Clinton except that terrible speech he made in 1988. I thought that he was dead forever then, but he came back. But the history of the parade, there was an Irishman who had a cockatoo bird, and some kind of a bird, some kind of an Irish bird. He didn't really have the bird, but he had a stuffed bird, and he organized the original parade in Chicago, which was on 79th Street. That was the South Side Parade. It wasn't called that then because it was the parade. And then somewhat later, that neighborhood, the people who had been involved were moving away, moving into other sections of Chicago, moving to the suburbs. So the city usurped the parade and moved it downtown. Then a few years later, a group out on the south side in my neighborhood decided to have another parade, and it was just a parade with little kids in baby buggies and little kids in coaster wagons and with decorations like floats. And out of that came the resurgence of the South Side Parade, which is a terrific thing. And a lot of South Siders will not go to the downtown parade. And it takes a lot of staying power anyway to drink your way through both of them. And so people, but there's a lack of understanding. There's no comprehension whatsoever, and I don't know if it exists in any other city, but there is a line of demarcation in every way. It's a Berlin-type wall that extends into the heavens in Chicago. There are many South Siders. I know people my age who have never been to a baseball game in Wrigley Field. Baseball, I'm talking about baseball fans, because they just won't go. The Cubs are North Side. We want nothing to do with them. And I realize there are North Siders who feel the same way. But the South Side Parade, it's just entertainment, and it makes a lot of money for the bars along Western Avenue. I don't think it helps a politician an iota, except going back to Clinton, where people were suspicious of this guy. Who the heck is he? Well, he came down the street, pretty good-looking guy, well-built, before he began to get fat on that White House food, and it helped him, but it's not going to help anybody. Richard M. Daley is going to march in it, but he doesn't march with the gusto that his dad did. His dad had that chest sticking out, and he was so happy to be there. I had a wonderful experience. This is completely off the subject, but I do want to talk about it. There is the Hamburg Club, and all Chicagoans know what the Hamburg Club is. That's the powerhouse from which the mayors came. The mayors Daley and Mayor Kennelly and Mayor not I'm going to say Verdoliak, oh God, and Mayor Kelly and a couple of others. And I went to they had a party there, and I cannot remember the reason for the party. And Richard J. was the mayor. Now, at this party, he was just another guy. He had been president of the Hamburg Club, but he was just another member of the Hamburg Club. And I was standing near him. This is the only time I was really around the mayor, except when he was younger. He sponsored basketball teams, and we used to play in the same tournaments that his teams played in, so we'd see him there. But nobody then thought he was going to be really important. But here was the mayor of Chicago, and one of these Irish bagpipe groups is playing, and he's standing there tapping his foot, and he's got this big grin. He probably never been happier in his life. He just was participating, and he wasn't there to get any votes because he had every vote. There was nobody in that room, I'm sure, that ever voted against him, because if a guy had voted against him, the door would have been locked to him. He would have been turned away. Get out of here. We don't need you.
Great. Do you have anything to add, Paul?
Yeah, I've got one question, and answer it to
You can
to
look at
Louis,
this,
Bill.
look at me.
But this is a wonderful interview, and I think this will get you thinking. You know, there are a lot of people, especially people in the big cities back east, that say if you're going to understand American politics, we're going to go to Washington, D.C., because that's where all the politics is. What do you say to that?
Washington, D.C., I've heard people say that, well, and unfortunately, most of them are political science students or graduates who have no idea what's going on in the world or in the country or in their own precinct. But they say, well, to understand American politics, you have to go to Washington, D.C. Well, that's just nonsense, because that isn't American politics. American politics is in the cities, it's in the counties, and if you really want to understand American politics, if you want a crash course, come here. Come here next month for the election. Be here and see what's happening. Be here in Chicago for the election, see who gets the presidential chair, and then go to Washington and walk through the White House. I've done that. It's inspiring, because I don't even know if Lincoln was there. I don't know if the thing was built, but Lincoln was around there somewhere. But a lot of terrible presidents were there too, including a lot we've had recently. So to see how politics work, I would advise everybody to come to Chicago. Be in Chicago in November. Come and help our hotels, check in for 3 or 4 days, and just get around the neighborhoods and see what's going on. Now, a person in Buffalo who is politically aware, he doesn't have to come. He understands that. Person in Newark, New Jersey, person, you can pick any city, a person in Denver, they don't have to come. But it's these young people, these would-be political scientists, they should be here.
Great. I have one more question, which I had forgotten before, and it was sort of the other side of the coin about, you said, people don't care what's going on in City Hall, they want to get their pothole filled, they want to make sure the garbage is picked up. Doesn't that sort of give some of the elected officials, I'm thinking specifically of the aldermen, a certain license to maybe get up to some shenanigans, because as long as they're delivering the services, are there temptations out there, and don't they occasionally succumb to those temptations?
There are aldermen now, as there have been down through the generations, who aren't satisfied with the aldermanic salaries and the perks that go with it. So if they can work out some kind of a deal, they're going to do it. And some of these guys, and fortunately most of the women who have been elected have been honorable, at least as far as we know. But some of these guys, and it's true on all levels of politics, they can't get enough. They're always looking for those extra bucks, and the more money they bring in, the more money they need. It's like so there's the seeds of corruption. You begin to be more and more and more corrupt. Now, I had an example here, and this is no knock on my alder person, because she really generously tried to help me. I wanted to put a very small cigar smoking porch on the side of my house. And the fellow who was to do the building for me, he said, "Bill, don't bother with a building permit. You just get into all kinds of red tape, and these people, they're always looking for something." I said, "Well, I'm a good citizen. You know, I vote. I always pay my taxes. I don't cheat on my taxes. So I'll go down." He said, "All right, as long as you want it, I'll go down and get it for you." Well, he went down, and he was told he couldn't get it, that I had to come down. When I told my alder woman about that, she said, "Well, that's not true." But I went down. Now, this thing went on for months, literally for months. Every step of the way, off in the distance, because I'm a Chicago political fan, I heard that word, very quietly, somewhere, drop, drop. Nobody spoke it, but it seemed to me it was implied. Well, part of the complication was I live in a landmark district. There are a lot of old mansions out here that are in very great, wonderful state of repair. They've been rehabilitated, renovated, and they're beautiful. Well, that complicated it, but I won't even go into the details of this. I wrote to my alder person, and she never wrote back, so obviously she couldn't do anything about it. But at the very end, I said, oh boy, I've got my building permit. Now, the young fellow from the ward who was helping me through this, and he did a marvelous job, he said, Bill, there's one more thing. Oh, he said, you have to get another plat of survey. And I said, well, I've got those little sheets. He said, no, you've got to get the big one. It's the black one with the white lines on it. And I said, well, has there been a seismic event out here that wasn't recorded up at Loyola on the seismograph? Has there been a minor earthquake? Has my lot tilted? And I've been here a year and a half. It's changed. Well, he said, and then he told me that there was a bargain, that they had a bargain out, that it would, and I'm just picking numbers out of the air, it would be $250, but I could, at this time of year, it was $165. And I thought to myself, now whose learning disabled nephew has this franchise? Who's in charge of this? Who wants me and hundreds of other people to get these surveys done over when there's no reason to do it? There's no need for it. So at that point, I was disgusted. I said, that's it, no more. I'm not going to bother with this. I'm just not going to build a thing. And if I do build it, I'll build it without a permit. And then they can come and arrest me. The thing I worry about is I have a lot of power because I'm a newspaper man. And people do not fool with newspaper men. Because we know how to get things done, and we know how to get things undone, and we know who to call. But I'm thinking of some poor person in the same situation who wants to build a little porch on the side of his home. He's got no defense at all. He's in the toils of these people. And I'm assuming that there are people there who are complicating this process, which should be very simple.
Okay. How much tape is there?
And rooms.
It's so old, it might even be,
Public domain.
yeah.
I want to pay for it.
Yeah, it looks great.
Let's
Oh,
about
yeah.
what they think about the mayor and all that sort of
Well,
thing.
they each have a role in it, and they're proud of the role. And Bar and Rick.
Ready to go.
Think we're going? Okay. This is something that occurred to me when we were, after we got back last year and we're looking at our footage, that there's sort of two sides to the way politics is conducted here. And one side is the ripping down the signs and the, maybe the old days of the strong arming. But the other side is, instead of the sledgehammer, it's the scalpel. It's sort of like maybe Italy under the Borgias or something like that, where there's all this stuff that you know and is left unsaid, and it's extremely subtle. But at the same time, everybody knows what's going on. Like city council meetings, they're arguing about one thing, but everybody knows they're arguing about something else. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The best free entertainment in the city of Chicago is the city council meeting, because there's so much posturing going on, and there's so many people doing things on a cue. It's so beautifully orchestrated. It was orchestrated by Richard J. Daley. It was orchestrated by Harold Washington once he got control, and now it's orchestrated by Richard M. Daley. And these people get up and they put on a show. I'm talking about an alderman for his constituents. Oh, Joe is out there fighting for us. Well, he's not fighting for them at all. He talks to the council leader and he says, well, now, Pete, I have to make this speech. You understand that? Yeah, well, the hell with nobody will take it seriously anyway. But it's so transparent. Everybody understands it in Chicago, unless you're a total nerd, or you have a terribly low IQ. You don't care about what's going on. But people who do care about what's going on, they know what's going on in the city council. You don't even have to be there. And we don't get enough of the city council on the local television news shows. They're desperate for product, as they call it, and they ignore this marvelous circus. They should give, when it's in session, because every time, at every meeting, there is something spectacular happens. Dorothy Tillman with her hats is just sufficient. This is showmanship. And she gets elected and reelected, and now Dorothy is becoming a moderate. So maybe she's planning to run for mayor someday. I don't know, but it's so delightful. I wish I had more time to go to city council meetings. And a lot of retired people, they go, that's part of their recreation. You know, they're court watchers too. They go down, they listen to court cases, and then they slither over to City Hall and they go up into the balcony in the council chambers, and some of these guys who are aldermen have never said a word. They've been aldermen for 16 years. They have never said a word in the city council. And you see them down there, they're reading the newspaper. And they're usually reading the sports section, the race results particularly. And they're as indifferent to this thing as anybody possibly could be, but they're addressed as aldermen. And when I was researching my book on Daley, I spent a lot of time in City Hall just observing. And toothpicks are very big in City Hall. A toothpick is a symbol of sophistication, especially if you hold it in the corner of your mouth. And the cigar chompers were there. I think City Hall, you can't smoke in there anymore, which I'm sure is going to shorten the lives of many of those people. All of the posturing and the coattail snatching and the buttonholing and the handshakes, and it's so phony. But those people understand it has to be done. Hello, Alderman. He's not your alderman, but you know he's an alderman. Hello, Judge. And the whole thing. That corridor there, anybody who's in the TV documentary business could just set up there with a camera on each end of that hallway, and then there's the hallway that runs north and south, and just take pictures of this stuff. Of course, you'd probably get arrested because they're up to something. They're trying to expose me.
We did actually go back, in back of the chambers, the press room, and it looked like that's where the action was, actually.
Yeah, well, the press room is interesting too, because those people, if they're there too long, they become just like the pals, and the coppers who are on duty there. They're mostly guys on disability, and they give you the handshake routine and oh, what do you need, Bill? What are you looking for today? Where do you want to go? And they'll escort you. Otherwise, it would be such a boring job. They'd sit in those little rooms, and what a terrible thing to do for 8 hours a day.
Paul?
Last question. It's such an important part of American politics is the old image of the urban machine, the urban bosses, the old, mostly Irish politician. Can you describe to Louis just what that image of politics was? Paint us a picture of what the old, Irish politician, urban boss, urban politics looked like.
Before we start, you mean physically?
Yeah, physically, just what politicians were like. I mean,
Physically, spiritually, it's part of American. It seems to me it's part of our collective history. It's one of our icons.
In large city politics in America, a generation ago, you almost had to be Catholic not necessarily Irish Catholic, but German Catholic, some Catholic of some kind, and ultimately it might even help a black candidate. He doesn't necessarily have to be Catholic, but he can say he's Catholic. Because there was that unanimity within the religion that people are always talking about that in those days. The priests would get up on the altar and urge the congregation to vote. I never heard that. I don't think it ever happened, but it didn't have to happen. They didn't have to be told to vote for their man. And this, again, the Irish are terrible infighters among themselves. They are in Ireland and they are here. They brought that with them. And the Irish brought that political awareness over on the boats. They knew how important it was, living under the English all those years and finally escaping from English rule. They knew how important politics was. And people forget this, who talk about machines and organizations. Politics for those people was freedom. That's how they got their children educated. That's how they got their jobs. That's how they got their automobiles. That's how they got some leisure time. That's how they got to enjoy life a little more. Because 25 years ago, or we must go back even farther than that. We have to go back probably 45 years ago. The Democratic administrations in almost every major city was pro-union. They supported the unions. They got things for the unions, and the unions and the union members supported them. Now, that's changed because the big problem, as I see it, and now I'm becoming an economist, is that the American union movement has been emasculated, and that's why the standard of living in this country hasn't risen. And a lot of young men who no longer are young men, middle-aged men, realize now what they did to themselves by not joining a union, not unionizing, because now the corporations are telling them after 20, 25, 30 years, a job which they thought they would hold for lifetime, so long, we no longer need you. And they're being laid off in numbers like 40,000 as they were just last year. And the administrations did a good job. As a person, I'm not a political scientist, and I never would be. I wouldn't want to be accused of that by any rational person. But I have observed politics, and I've written a book about politics and talked to many politicians. I know many politicians, and it's necessary to us. It's air and water, really, because without it, what do you have? You have what we had in Eastern Europe before communism, not just during communism, before communism. That's why so many of these people fled to the United States.
Okay. Anything else?
That was wonderful.